From Bloodhound's real voice to Ash's secret ability that was only available in one mode, loads of legends have loads of secrets, including some pretty questionable ones actually. So let's jump straight into it, because when you talk about legend reworks, two legends most likely come to mind for you: Revenant getting reworked into Revenant Reborn, and Lifeline getting reworked into Lifeline Revived. But you may not be aware, very early in Apex's life, one legend was reworked, and you probably have zero idea. And believe it or not, it was Mirage, as upon Apex's release, his ultimate worked way differently to how it works now. Originally, when he came out, when you activated his ultimate, several decoys would pop out but not actually follow your moves. They would just stand there, and you, as the Mirage, would become invisible, and you were granted invisibility for a pretty notable amount of time, to the point where you literally had a button prompt to deactivate the invisibility, which is pretty different to how it works now, as when you activate Mirage's ultimate now, you have a very short window of invisibility, and your decoys move when you move. It was clear very early in Apex's life, Respawn weren't very happy with Mirage's ultimate, and they actually let people beta test his new ultimate ability before they actually released it, but in a secret way, as in Season 3, Respawn released a mode called Dummy's Big Day, where you played as a faceless dummy with random abilities, and one of the ultimate abilities for the dummy was called Emergency Dance Party, which you may recognise. After people really enjoyed this ability and said it should become a Mirage ability, well, lo and behold, not long after, Mirage got that as his new ultimate, leaving the old ultimate to be deleted, and I think Respawn made the right decision here. I have another fact about Mirage later in this video, but first, there's a very interesting fact around Caustic and this skin, because this skin right here is actually what Caustic dreams to be. Seriously. As 4 years ago, oh my god, this was 4 years ago, Respawn released a comic wrapping up Season 9, and one of the panels was pretty interesting. It said, "Caustic's lab today. When it's your time on the slab, what will you leave behind for your loved ones?" And in front of Caustic looking pretty annoyed, there was a letter that said, "Dear Mikhail Caustic, we regret to inform you that your application to become a simulacrum upon your demise has been rejected. Unfortunately, the results of your psychology exam proved to be," and then it's obscured, and then it says, "and a lack of empathy." So basically, Caustic was too evil to be allowed to have his consciousness transferred into a robotic body after his death. So basically, Caustic wasn't allowed to become a simulacrum like Ash and Revenant were. After Respawn released this comic, they actually went back to a skin all the way from Season 4 called Necrosis and added a story to it, saying Caustic, since his death was imminent, at one point sought to become a simulacrum. His project proposal was rejected after the results of his psychological exam proved troubling, showing that this skin is kind of a lore skin, but almost what Caustic wanted to be, not what he could be. So in another universe, this could have been a future version of Caustic, which I think is pretty cool. Another pretty cool thing is, when you hear a legend without their voice filter, obviously we have a few legends that have a voice filter, like Revenant, Ash, and also Bloodhound, because they're either robots or they're wearing a mask. Luckily, through a mistake in a Portuguese trailer, we managed to hear Revenant without his voice filter.
They only think they know what fear is.
But also, a few years ago, through a Twitter animated video, we got to hear Bloodhound without their mask's voice filter, which was also pretty cool.
I'm not going anywhere.
Volta.
Despite this, we never got to see an unmasked Bloodhound. I think the closest we've ever got to an unmasked Bloodhound was during the Season 10 trailer, where Bloodhound takes a bit of their mask off and you can see that their head is shaved. Which, to be fair, if you are wearing like a helmet setup all day, you probably want your head shaved, otherwise it's going to get so sweaty and gross in there, I can't even imagine. Going back to in-game stuff though, there's one legend who has an in-game item that you can view, but nobody can equip. Essentially, an unobtainable cosmetic. And this is Bangalore. And weirdly enough, this has happened since release, so I don't think it's ever going to change, and I don't think this item is ever going to release. To start this off, you kind of have to be aware that the flyers on Kings Canyon drop death boxes when they die. But the thing is, they don't drop death boxes of people who have already died in the match or people who are in the lobby, but instead they drop the death boxes of developers. And one of the developer death boxes is very interesting because it features a pose that has never never released, not for 6 years. And this pose is over on Bangalore. This was cited many times during early Apex, and a lot of people assumed one day this pose would release, but it never ever did. This pose has been viewable a few times through situations where people have every item unlocked in Apex, but nobody has ever been able to equip it properly in Apex, and right now it seems like possibly the only person that can equip this is the developer who has it on their death box. Nobody knows why this specific pose has never come out, but it's one of those pretty cool Apex trivia things where literally nobody has this item, but it's been in the game forever. A pretty crazy thing that isn't in the game anymore because Ash got reworked recently was Ash's secret passive. If you're not aware, when Ash originally came out, she had a passive that only worked in Battle Royale, as it required you to throw a data knife into a death box, which would then scan the killing team of the death box's player, which was pretty cool, but it was very situational. But there was one glaring issue. This passive wouldn't work in Mixtape because nobody drops death boxes. This led Respawn to create a new passive for Ash that was exclusive to Mixtape. Now, this new passive was somewhat similar to her Battle Royale passive, but was arguably a bit more useful in the Mixtape setting, as if you had a friendly die within your vicinity, the killer of the friendly would be highlighted with a ping, so you'll be able to find the killers really easily. This was a good substitute for Ash, and was, once again, a new passive for her. But obviously, since she got reworked and her passive became a dash, they removed this, and let's just say her new passive is infinitely more useful in my opinion. Lifeline was another legend to get a rework, but the reason for her rework was pretty interesting, as obviously Respawn had a balancing reason to give her a rework, but they needed a lore reason to give her a rework as well. They couldn't just make her different for no reason. So they gave this reason in the launch trailer for Season 23, and it went over a lot of people's heads as it required a comic follow-up to understand. But essentially, in the Season 23 launch trailer, Doc gets sucked into a rift, and Lifeline puts her hand in to try to save Doc. But unfortunately, during this time, Doc is stabbed by an evil version of Horizon with a karambit, and then the rift partially closes on Lifeline's arm, which results in a weird effect on her arm. And it was shown during Season 23 in a follow-up comic, Lifeline was shown to be repairing Doc after the damage Doc endured, and also, Lifeline's injured hand had now been replaced by a metal prosthetic. So the reason Lifeline actually got reworked in lore is literally because evil Horizon stabbed Doc and caused Lifeline to injure her arm, which is pretty crazy. Evil Horizon was such an underutilized character that was shown so minimally, and her only impact was literally a skin that got added to the game, which really sucks. Let's go back to Mirage though, because I told you he had a pretty weird secret, and with the recent Halloween update that added a pumpkin skin for Mirage, it makes this secret a bit weirder, as every time Mirage is mentioned, there'll always be one person that'll go, Mirage pumpkin incident, and not a lot of people are aware of the Apex lore between Mirage and a pumpkin. By the way, this is real lore that I'm about to read out word for word, as in the early days of Apex, Respawn released some pretty cool lore, a dating profile for Mirage, and over on this profile, it said, seeking women aged 25 to, I don't know, 25 to alive, and definitely just women, and not like, you know, pumpkins. Never been attracted to pumpkins. Definitely wasn't attracted to a pumpkin that night on Dionysus where I ate those Kiona mushrooms. Wait, did I say that out loud? Which suggests Mirage got freaky with a pumpkin at some point, and apparently Caustic saw this freakiness in Apex lore, as Respawn would later share this image as some promotional art, and it said, as a quote from Caustic regarding Mirage, the most beloved legend of Cucurbita everywhere. And Cucurbita is another name for pumpkins. So yeah, when Mirage got this skin recently, it made people ask some questions. But one question I have is, why aren't you subscribed? Statistically, you've watched a few of my videos and you're not subscribed. It would mean a lot, especially because we're getting close to Apex's Christmas update.